Hi, I'm Marusha Singh.
My name is Candice.
Hi, my name is Tremaine.
Hi, my name is Nivashni Singh.
Everyone, I am Joy Russell.
Hi, my name is Mbali Sweetness Puri.
My name is Morgan Try.
And I'm a person with a disability.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our workshop titled Inclusion in Action, Disability Awareness and Implementation. My name is Morgan Try, and I'm an expert on the topic. And today we are going to explore what disability inclusion really means, what the law requires of us, and most importantly, practical ways to make our workplace more inclusive for everyone. Over the next hour, we'll be covering understanding disability, both visible and invisible, the legal framework we must comply with, practical steps for reasonable accommodation. We'll also be talking about real life success stories from South African companies, and lastly, your personal commitment to inclusion. Before we go ahead into the session, please do feel free to ask any questions as we go along, and I'll leave room for discussion at the end. So before we get into the detail about disability inclusion, let's pause for a moment and ask ourselves, why are we here? Why does this really matter to us as individuals, as a business, as an organization, and even as a country? Strategic Skills Development Specialists is proudly Black owned, led by a person with a disability, reinforcing our deep commitment to transformation, empowerment, and authentic representation. Strategic Skills Development Specialists therefore leads by example. And now that we've spoken about inclusion in numbers and in business terms, sometimes it's good to look at it from a real life story. Up next, we will be watching a short video of one of our colleagues share his personal journey about living with a disability and what employment meant for him. Let's take a look.
Hi everyone, my name is Sebastian Naidu, and I am a corporate etiquette specialist, a corporate speaker, and an SME facilitator for a company called Strategic Skills Specialists. I have a story to tell you. In the year 2015, I was diagnosed with a condition called leukemia, which is a rare form of cancer. And in the year 2022, life had become more difficult because I had to go through a bone marrow transplant. The chemo cycles were very challenging. It put so much of strain on me, and eventually I had to give up work. When I had to go back to work, many companies were giving me a very difficult time. In the year 2022, I had to go in for a bone marrow transplant, and with that, I had many cycles of chemotherapy. The chemotherapy had caused a lot of damage. I was a high flyer at work, training some of the best companies in South Africa. And now I found myself suddenly looking for employment. And as soon as I disclosed my status to companies, they didn't seem very willing to assist me. I was about to throw in the towel, and I got a call from Strategic Skills, and they were willing to take me on. At this point, I thought it would be another wasted interview, but I gave my best in that interview. When it was time to disclose my illness, I was like, yeah, this is it. They're probably now going to tell me, you know what, look, we don't need someone like you who's living with a disability. To my surprise, they were absolutely accommodating. And I think that was one of the best interviews I've had, because the follow-up was what took my breath away. And my management, the first thing they said is, look, you're a brilliant individual. We love the way you deliver your training. Management then told me they have best practices in place. So I asked them, what is best practice? And they told me, look, you have leukemia, you need hospital days. We're willing to give it to you. And I'm sure you can find a way to drive up solutions and meet deadlines. And I'm like, yes. The entire leukemia situation had caused me to become innovative, to become creative, and to formulate my own ways of thinking. So I brought that into the workplace. And by doing that, it has given me so much more self-esteem that I'm able to meet those deadlines. I'm still able to deliver high quality training. Some of the best practices are on a certain or particular day, I'll probably have swelling, and they'll be like, no, you stay at home, train from the luxury at your home. Or if I need a few hours at the hospital, go to the hospital. If you're feeling good, come in. Some of the other things that were given to me was a good laptop where I was able to access material, create recordings, upload high quality videos. All of this can randomly change the training and development industry.
Thank you, Sebastian, for sharing your story with us. And thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for taking your time to watch that. Stories like this remind us that inclusion is personal, but it's also strategic. Beyond individual lives, inclusion creates real value in organizations. So now we are going to take a look at why the business case is a smart investment. And today we are going to be talking about three main business benefits. Number one, compliance. We avoid legal risk by meeting obligations under the EEA, the Code of Good Practice, and related laws. Inclusive practices also ensure alignment with the Occupational and Safety Act, where accessibility and safety for all employees is a legal requirement. And then we have number two, transformation. Disability inclusion directly supports our employment equity and BBEE objectives. Transformation is not about the scorecards. It's about creating a culture where people feel valued, safe, and motivated to contribute. Diverse perspectives lead to better problem solving and creativity. Employees with disabilities often develop unique workarounds that spark fresh approaches, and of course, this overall improves processes for the entire team. Now, I'm going to give you guys an example. One company redesigned their call center system to include screen reader software. Now, this did not only help the visually impaired staff, but improved efficiency for all employees. Now, if we are talking about the business case, it's also important to understand the way society has traditionally looked at disability. These perspectives shape the way workplaces respond. And now this brings us to our next point, which is models of disability. Today we will be covering two main models, which is number one, the medical model, which focuses on the person's impairment, often seeing it as a problem to be fixed. Number two, the social model, which focuses on removing barriers in society, whether it be physical, attitudinal, or systematic, that prevent full participation. The social model is what our laws and our policies is based on. The social model is what our laws and our policies are based on. It shifts responsibility from the individual to the environment and its systems. These models help us frame our thinking, but disability is not a one-size-fits-all. To be truly inclusive, we need to recognize the wide range of disabilities, which is both visible and invisible. Which brings us to our next point, types of disabilities. We often think of disabilities like someone using a wheelchair, a guide dog, or a hearing aid. But something we should always remember is that many disabilities are in fact invisible, such as chronic illnesses, diabetes, epilepsy, mental health conditions, and neurodivergence. Just because we cannot see it doesn't mean that it's not there. Disability is not defined by what we see. It's rather defined by the challenges and barriers people face. Some face unique challenges that could either be hidden or visible. But inclusion means that we support both. When we only focus on what we can see, we miss the bigger picture. True inclusion begins when we acknowledge every disability, whether it be visible or invisible. And once we understand the spectrum of disabilities, we also begin to understand the laws that guide us. South Africa has a strong legislation in place to protect and empower people with disabilities. Now let's explore what that requires in us. Moving on, we have key legislation, and there are several key laws and guidelines. Number one, Employment Equity Act, which defines disability, prohibits discrimination, and requires reasonable accommodation. The Act requires employers to provide reasonable accommodation, which means making changes to the work environment or practices so that a person with a disability can perform their job effectively. Number 2, Code of Good Practice. Explains how to implement inclusion in the workplace. This code takes the principles of the EEA and translates them into practical guidelines. It explains the important concepts like confidentiality, disclosure, and reasonable accommodation, while emphasizing that employees with disabilities should always be treated with dignity and respect. Number 3, Technical Assistance Guidelines, which is step-by-step advice for HR and managers. Number 4, SANS 10400. Building accessibility requirements. Compliance ensures that both employees and visitors with disabilities can access and use facilities dependently and with dignity. And last, the OHS Act and RAPUDA, which is health, safety, and anti-discrimination obligations. Importantly, the OHS Act also emphasizes employee participation. This means employees with disabilities should be involved in discussions about health and safety. They best understand the risks they face and accommodations they need. So now that we've seen what the law expects from us, inclusion isn't just compliance, it's respect. Respecting the next person, their dignity, and their rights. Up next, we will be watching a short video that brings this point home. Let's take a look.
Do you think treating everyone the same is always the best? Not quite. Don't talk down on them. Avoid making assumptions about what they can and can't do. Just ask if you're not sure. Don't offer unwanted help. Respect their space and their independence. Most importantly, remember, disability doesn't define a person. Treat them with the same respect and kindness you would want for yourself. Let's make the world a friendlier place, one interaction at a time.
Respect starts by breaking down misconceptions. So we are going to do a quick exercise, and we are going to decide if whether the statement I am reading out is a myth or a fact. You can either drop down it in the drop box, or you can send us an email directly. And the statement that I'm going to read today is that most people with disabilities need costly accommodation. For those who did not hear me, I'm going to repeat the statement one more time. And that is, most people with disabilities need costly accommodation. Ladies and gentlemen, it is a myth, because most accommodations cost little or nothing. In fact, many are simple changes to processes or schedules. Accommodation is less about cost and more about commitment. Some adjustments are small, low cost, and most of the time even free. Yet they send a powerful message that every employee matters. By making small changes to either schedules, it could be relocating a desk, organizations unlock far greater potential than cost. So now that we have busted some myths, it's also insightful to look at some of the mistakes people often make when it comes to disability. So now we are going to watch a short video that shows the mistakes that we often make so we can learn what not to do. Let's take a look. One of the biggest mistakes that we can make today is in the language and in the words that we choose to use. Language has power. It can either break down barriers or it can build them, which takes us to our next point. Language matters. So now we are going to take a look at why language matters so much. And I'm going to give you guys an example. I can either say a person with a disability and not the disabled. I can rather use words such as uses a wheelchair and not confined to a wheelchair. Why? Because our word shape perception and language fosters inclusion. The words we choose to use every day have the power to either reinforce stereotypes or dismantle them, to exclude or to invite, to diminish or to empower. When we speak with respect by saying a person with a disability instead of the disabled, or uses a wheelchair instead of confined to a wheelchair, just being polite, we are now shaping a culture of respect, dignity, and equality. Which is powerful, yes, but words alone aren't enough. True inclusion becomes real when we notice the moments where support is needed and action is taken on it. Which brings us to our next point. Trigger points for accommodation. We have a duty to accommodate when an employee discloses a need or when it's obvious that they need support. It's important to remember that accommodation is not about giving special treatment. It's about removing barriers that prevent employees from performing at their full potential. These adjustments can range from physical changes, whether it be ramps, lifts, or accessible toilets, to procedural adjustments such as flexible hours or job restructuring, providing assistance in devices and technology. Failure to respond to these trigger points not only creates legal risk under the Employment Equity Act and Code of Good Practice, but also risks including talented employees who could contribute meaningful if given the right support. I'm going to give you guys an example. If someone arrives at the workplace in a wheelchair and there are only stairs available, it is clear that change is needed and required. So once a trigger point is identified, what do we actually do? That's where reasonable accommodation process comes in, a clear step-by-step guide that will help you with solutions that actually work. And the process is actually simple, ladies and gentlemen. Number one, assess the essential functions of the job. Number two, consult with the employee to understand their needs. Number three, implement a trial accommodation. And number four, review and adjust as needed. Something we should always remember to do is to keep the process confidential and collaborative. To bring this process to life, we are going to watch a video that shows how reasonable accommodation can work in practice. And straight after, I'll be sharing some powerful low-to-no cost examples that prove that accommodation doesn't have to break the budget. Let's take a look.
Accessibility isn't just a bonus, it's a basic right. Yet too often, talented people are shut out not because they lack skills, but because the environment isn't ready for them. A simple ramp can be the difference between opportunity and rejection. Best practice means planning ahead, ensuring workplaces, processes, and technology welcome everyone from the start. It's about seeing ability before disability and making adjustments that benefit all. When organizations listen, adapt, and act, they don't just fix a problem, they open the door to talent, innovation, and equality.
So now that we're on our next slide, which is low to no cost examples, the examples that I'm going to use often, inclusion is about creativity rather than cost. What's important to remember is that accommodation does not always mean physical changes like ramps or lifts. Very often, it's about flexibility, empathy, and creativity, finding ways to remove barriers so that employees can perform to the best of their ability. Many of these solutions don't help the individual, they make the workplace more productive and inclusive for everyone. For example, flexible hours, can improve work-life balance across the team, and quiet spaces benefit employees needed to concentrate deeply on tasks. Workplaces must be accessible, whether it be ramps, signage, accessible toilets, and even parking spaces. As you can see, accommodation is simple and affordable, but we also need to think bigger about our safety measures, buildings, and emergency plans. And that's where facilities and safety comes in. Let's take a look. Workplaces must be accessible, whether it be ramps, signage, accessible toilets, and even parking spaces. We also need personal emergency evacuation plans for individuals who may need assistance during those emergencies. Accessibility goes beyond simply allowing someone to enter the building. It means creating an environment where all employees, clients, and visitors can move around and use facilities independently and with dignity. When we design spaces and safety plans that include people with disabilities, we don't just remove barriers, we create workplaces where everyone feels valued, protected, and able to thrive. Inclusion in safety and facilities isn't about obligation. It's about building a culture where no one feels left out and everyone belongs. Of course, inclusion doesn't only begin when someone is employed. It starts at recruitment. Which brings us to our next point, inclusive recruitment. Inclusive recruitment means job ads that welcome candidates with disabilities, accessible interview locations, and flexibility in assessment methods. Partnerships with organizations and training providers can help build a strong talent pipeline. Inclusive recruitment opens doors to a wider pool of talent, innovation, and perspectives. By making small adjustments to how we advertise, interview, and assess, we are not giving advantage. We are giving fair opportunity, and in doing so, we discover strengths that may have been overlooked before. Making sure our hiring processes are welcoming from the very first step. Theory is important, yes, but what does it look like in practice? So now we are going to explore a case study on how Sizabans successfully integrated inclusion in their workplace. Let's take a look. Sizabans successfully integrated a learner with a disability into their head office through a skills development partnership. The learner was later offered permanent employment, showcasing the long-term value of inclusive practices. To support the learner, Sizabans implemented reasonable accommodations, including extended time to complete tasks, a larger screen for better accessibility, ongoing mentorship and support. And Sizabans isn't the only example. We are now going to take a look at Sequeni Foods, where inclusion was built into their scale programs on a larger scale. Let's take a look. Sequeni Foods partnered with strategic skills development specialists to run a large-scale amount of learnerships, including learners with disabilities across various departments. In the laboratory division, accommodations were made to ensure accessibility and effective participation. These included assigning lighter duties suited to individual capabilities, implementing reasonable accommodation measures in the lab environment, and number 3, incorporating succession planning to support long-term inclusion and career growth. This approach demonstrates how inclusive planning and flexible task allocation can support both learning outcomes and organizational development. These case studies prove that inclusion is possible. But what can we do starting now? Let's take a look at some of the key insights that we've covered in the session so far. This will help us reflect on the main lessons we've covered. Inclusion benefits people and businesses. Small actions make big impact. Compliance isn't just a legal duty, it's a competitive advantage. When we create workplaces that are accessible and supportive, employers are more engaged, more productive, and more loyal. At the same time, businesses gain from broader talent pools, stronger transformation outcomes, and the innovation that comes from diverse perspectives. Inclusion is not a charity, it is not a tick box, and it's not about lowering standards. Instead, it is about unlocking potential, removing barriers, and ensuring that every person has a fair chance to opportunity and to contribute their skills. And to put this into action, we've prepared some resources and templates for you that will help you, of which you will receive as soon as the session has ended. Thank you to everyone for taking your time to join our online disability inclusion workshop. We appreciate your commitment to learning, reflecting, and engaging on such an important topic. Inclusion doesn't stop when the session ends. It begins with what we choose to do next. Together, we can create workplaces that are not only compliant, but that are fair, equal, and empowering for everyone. Thank you once again, and let's keep inclusion in action. My name is Morgan Dry, and it has been an honor spending this time with you. Have a productive day.